Let's break down a really pivotal moment in Indian constitutional history, the Charter Act of 1853. Now, if you're studying Indian polity, especially for exams like the UPSC, you know this act is absolutely crucial. It's just packed with changes that really laid the groundwork for how India is governed today. All right, so let's get right to the big question this act posed. Was this the beginning of the end for the East India Company? I mean, was this the moment the British Crown basically put everyone on notice that it was planning to take direct control of India? Let's find out.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll get into the context, why this was the final charter. Then we'll see how it started to chip away at the company's power, brought in some huge administrative reforms, created India's very first real legislature, and finally, why it all signaled that an era was coming to a close.
Okay, first up, context. To really get why the 1853 Act was such a big deal, you have to understand the one key thing that made it completely different from all the charters that came before it. See the difference there? It's subtle, but so important. Before this, every charter gave the company a guaranteed 20-year lease on life, so to speak. But the 1853 Act, it broke that pattern. It renewed the company's right to govern, but it added this critical little detail. The company held the territories in trust for Her Majesty with no specific end date. This was no accident. It was a clear signal from London that the Crown could end the company's rule whenever it wanted. And that leads us perfectly into our next point. The act wasn't just about sending subtle signals. It took actual, concrete steps to weaken the company's power, starting right at the very top with its main governing body, the Court of Directors.
First off, they just cut down the numbers. Simple as that. The strength of the Court of Directors was slashed from 24 members down to 18. Right away, that shrinks the company's core leadership.
But here's the real kicker. It wasn't just about fewer directors. For the very first time, 6 of these positions were going to be appointed directly by the Crown. Think about that for a second. That means placing people loyal to the Crown right inside the company's most powerful committee. It was a huge shift. Okay, so the Crown is getting its people into the boardroom. But the act went way deeper than that. It also rolled out 2 landmark administrative reforms that would honestly have profound and long-lasting consequences for how India was actually governed on the ground. You have to remember, by this point, the company's territory was getting massive. And the Governor-General of India was also trying to be the governor of Bengal. I mean, the workload was just becoming impossible. So to fix this, the act created a brand new, separate governor just for the Bengal presidency. A simple, practical move to streamline the administration. All right, pay close attention here because this next one is a classic exam topic, the civil service. This act completely blew up the old system. It moved away from the old method of patronage, where company directors could just appoint their friends and family, to a new system of an open, competitive examination. This was a true revolution in public administration. And this whole idea, which came from the Macaulay Committee, was an absolute game changer. It meant the most prestigious jobs, the covenanted civil services, were now open to Indians, well, in theory at least, based purely on merit. This didn't just open a door for Indians, it completely stripped the company directors of one of their biggest powers, patronage. It was a massive blow to their influence. Now we get to what is, for my money, the single most important part of this act, especially if you're looking at it from a constitutional history angle. This is where we see the very first seeds of a modern Indian legislature being planted. And this is a really key concept you need to lock in. Before this act, the Governor-General's Council was a jack of all trades. It made the laws, and it enforced the laws. This act said, nope, not anymore. For the very first time, it drew a clear line in the sand between making laws, the legislative function, and carrying them out, the executive function. And to make this separation a reality, the act expanded the Governor-General's Council, adding 6 new members called legislative councillors, just for the purpose of lawmaking. So as you can see, this created a new 12-member legislative body, often called a mini-parliament, with a clear division between the old executive wing and the new legislative wing. And get this. This was another huge first. 4 of these new legislative members weren't just picked out of London. They were actually representatives appointed by the local provincial governments of Bengal, Madras, Bombay, and Agra. For the very first time, local regions in India were given a voice, however small, in making laws at the central level. All right, let's pull all these threads together now and go back to that question we started with. When you look at everything, the weakened court of directors, the end of patronage, the creation of a new central legislature, what was the unspoken message of this act?
And really, it all boils down to what the act didn't say. Every charter before this one had a 20-year guarantee stamped on it. This one? Nothing. The silence was deafening. The message was clear. The East India Company was officially on borrowed time.
So when you put all the pieces on the board, Crown appointees in the boardroom, a civil service based on open competition, a brand new legislature taking shape, you can see the writing on the wall, right? The act was systematically dismantling the company's authority, piece by piece. It was basically setting the stage for the final act. And it leaves us with this powerful takeaway. After 1853, it was no longer a question of if the Crown would take over direct rule, it was just a matter of when.